Speaking for the trees, no matter where they're from. The podcast.
Land use is the other leg. Have you come across Millán Millán, the Spanish profound climatologist scientist who has been left out of the main narrative?
No.
Do you know him?
No, I don't.
He's a very interesting guy. He's old now. He's 84, but he's very, very active, and he has taken part in many conferences, and he speaks out a lot. Once upon a time, his narrative, his work was very profound. He found he has extremely important evidence as to what happens with climate. And it's the one leg is supposed to be the greenhouse effect. Mm-hmm. But the greenhouse effect is of lesser importance in a way, because it's what happens with land use that determines what the greenhouse effect will do, how the greenhouse effect reacts. For example, if we managed to cool the surface of our Earth, by not covering everything with artificial land uses, the Earth would sort of radiate coolness. So the greenhouse effect would have no effect, if you see what I mean. There's a lot of people working on that. Millán is one of them. I can perhaps introduce you to some of the work. There's this guy, Rob Lewis, a poet.
I know him.
American. Do you know him? He's written a lot. He's written a three-part. He's written a three. He's a very nice guy. I haven't met him, but I'm really fond of him, and I would love to meet him one day. And he's written a three-part story in his Substack about Millán. So it's very interesting, because it's very simple, and it describes the history of why the other leg of climate change and dealing with climate change was left out. And now the IPCC is concentrated on a narrative that these people, the research that they've done, believe that it's not going to work anyway. So it's not the way to deal. It's a very reductionist view to only go for CO2. Yeah. I mean, we've started from a human activity, as you describe it very nicely, ruining a lot of its land uses, changing everything. Then we've gone into, that's what they say, then we've gone into human activity concerning only the fossil fuel burning. Mm-hmm. And from there, we've taken out only the CO2, which is produced by fossil fuel burning, and we're trying to deal with a very intricate and very complex situation only by dealing with the CO2. Of all the greenhouse effect, we've chosen to deal with CO2. So this shows the craziness. Mm-hmm. And it's all related, of course, with what you're describing. It shows us how important nature is, because we need to follow the rules that nature sets in order to deal with what the crises, which are multi-crises that we're dealing in right now. And that the ecological crisis is connected 100% related to climate crisis. Climate crisis is not something that just came from the skies.
No. I don't understand when people say fight climate change. I'm like, what do you mean fight climate change? Like, it's an expression of the different relationships that are going on. And it's like the hijacking of the environmental movement with the carbon conversation is like just the epitome of this oversimplification that's gotten us in trouble. It's like cut us off from being in relation with the rest of the natural world. Like, it's kind of funny that we still have to remind ourselves that nature is important. Like, that's kind of weird, There's all kinds of layers in that, but it's like somehow we keep forgetting, and we don't trust that all of those relationships together is what makes a life possible here. You can't streamline it, you can't pull out carbon. You can't over channelize all of the streams. You can't dam them all and expect it to function the same. It's going to function differently, you know, like,
Exactly.
yeah, bringing up the cooling of the earth. This has been coming up in research I've been doing for like the fire mitigation stuff, because people are really afraid of the big fires. And there's also other conversation going on about how to live with fire, and you know, there's some nuance coming in. But the fire mitigation is like these huge projects that take out a lot of vegetation because it's all considered fuel, you know. But it's like there's also another big part of the conversation that's talking about, if you remove all of that vegetation, you're not shading the soil anymore. You end up drying it out more, and then the winds come through, and it's like wind tunnels, you know. So it's like, and it seems like it's hard. People are like afraid to consider the whole thing, you know. They want to have one thing to hang it on so that we have an answer. And I think a part of that is like this deep anxiety. And maybe a part of that deep anxiety is that we don't feel like we belong here. Like we don't actually feel that in our bodies, you know, that we belong here, that the world takes care of us, that it's a reciprocal thing, you know, like more and more, you know, from being involved in land-based attention and practices for 18 years of my life, that part comes up strong, that it's like, what is it in us, this separation, that causes us to not be able to work with the natural world for our solutions, you know? Like I went to school for environmental science in the early 2000s, and I remember the carbon trading conversation was brand new when I was in there. We were just talking about it as a theoretical thing in environmental economics classes, and talking about ways it made sense, ways it didn't make any sense at all. And now it's like such a big part of the conversation, and it doesn't have a basis in reality of there being any less carbon put into the atmosphere, because you can just trade it and say that you're good. Like you created all this carbon, but you bought this forest over here, kicked out all of the indigenous folks, and that's your carbon reserve. So you can continue doing your thing. And it's just like, we have to start thinking about it as a holistic relationship, because that's the only solution. It's like a big universal ask in our existence here to heal at all levels, to consider them all at the same time. And we're capable of doing that, you know, not maybe from a linear, rational or so-called rational way of existing, but like, yeah. And yeah, you're talking about infrastructure over there, and I do vegetation consultation for land management agencies, and with the utility world, you know, I teach them plant ID and how to look at landscapes and what habitat means and what it can look like and stuff like that. And there's 9 million acres of right-of-ways in North America. That's a lot of land under the infrastructure just to move energy around. And I heard a quote about how many more miles of like utility lines are needed just for the green energy we've already started to make. It's 10,000 miles of wires that are needed. Like, these things don't come without an extra addition of infrastructure beyond what we already have. You can't just use the same infrastructure, especially when you're putting in your sources, your solar arrays in the middle of nowhere. That means that whole distance between the middle of nowhere and wherever people want to use the electricity, you need lines and wires and bulldozers, you know. So yeah, it's like, I don't know, there's some kind of thing, some kind of fantasy lurking in the background that we can have no effect, you know, that we can live the way we're living, and that this new renewable energy or the internet is like an ether that doesn't have a physical representation. But it's not true. Everything has a physical representation. Like I saw this solar array being built by where I grew up in Colorado. And I watched it being built over a couple of years, and ended up being quite a large solar array on the side of the highway. And was talking to my dad about it, and it came out that it was for mining Bitcoin. It was a green energy, you know, set up so that they could mine Bitcoin for make-believe money, you know. That's like, oh, these things they all have a physical reality still, you know. But I think that part gets forgotten, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's because too many people are in cities and they don't see outside.
Yeah.
And when they do go outside, they go to all these marvelous places that are specially chosen for them to have a nice weekend or some holiday.
Yeah.
So they don't actually see all this infrastructure that you know, if you actually go and see what is going on, perhaps you become more sensitized of the environment around you.
Yeah.
But I think the climate is here has changed. I mean, we're having all these climate crises, you know, these extreme weather phenomena and so on. And all these, I mean, Millán explains it very well how it happens globally, not just locally, but from a local level to a global level to a European to so on. And it's happening and it's affecting people's lives.